Hey everyone, Dr. David Clark. If you are a woman and you have any of the following 5 autoimmune conditions you see here on the screen, you have a 30% increased risk of something called perinatal depression. Today I'm going to take a few minutes and explain what that means, and if you have one of these conditions or if you have perinatal depression, what you ought to do about it. So new research came out and basically found that if you have Hashimoto's, psoriasis, ulcerative colitis, multiple sclerosis, or celiac disease, you have a 30% increased risk of perinatal depression. Now, sometimes we'll call that postpartum depression, and that's, it's a condition that's not that uncommon. But what this research found, it's very interesting, is that if you have perinatal depression, you also have a 30% increased risk of those autoimmune conditions. So it's a two-way street. And you might ask yourself, well, what is the connection? Well, there's always been a connection that's been known between autoimmune diseases and depression. In fact, I have a video, I'll put the card for it here. You guys can take a look at it because there is a shared similarity in inflammatory and immune system pathways and some of the molecular pathways. So that connection was always known. But now we know that there are specific autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's and psoriasis, etc., that are definitely related to developing perinatal depression. And I've seen, hundreds of women over the last 20 years that have had perinatal depression as part of their history. A lot of them that make it to me have had Hashimoto's. I see a lot of Hashimoto's patients, but now we know that's not the only condition that's associated with it. And some of the reasons why that happens, and I've also got videos on this, is that there's a lot of hormonal shifts obviously that occur in and around pregnancy. And some of those things can unbalance the immune system and make autoimmune diseases become triggered. It can make them worse. Sometimes it makes them better. But now we know that these other conditions are certainly at play. Now, why am I even talking about this? Well, if you have one of those conditions and you're not pregnant yet, there's some things you might want to do to probably limit your risk of having perinatal depression. And what I mean by that is you need to be working with someone that knows how to look at your immune system, analyze what your immunophenotype is, or what is your immune system fingerprint, and be able to determine what is the best course of treatment for you to help regulate your immune system. Because despite what you may have heard or read, there are plenty of things you can do for autoimmune conditions like those ones I've mentioned, right? Hashimoto, psoriasis, celiac disease. But you just got to be working with someone that knows how to do it. What I like to do in my office is I will do lymphocyte map testing, which is the fancy name for that is comprehensive lymphocyte immunophenotyping. Now, a phenotype just means what does something look like. And so that's basically like finding out what is your immune system fingerprint. So it doesn't really matter what your diagnosis is. All of us have our own individual immunophenotype. And your diagnosis, whether it's Hashimoto's or psoriasis or whatever, doesn't tell you what your immune system is going to look like in your particular situation. I mean, yeah, you kind of get in the ballpark, but in order for real specific tailored treatment, it pays to know, for example, and I'll put an example up here, are your Th1 cells high? Are your Th2 cells low? Are your CD4 high, right? Treatment differs based on what that actually is. So my suggestion to you is if you have one of these autoimmune conditions I've put on the screen here, and you're thinking about getting pregnant, you might want to try to do some things ahead of time to make sure your immune system is as regulated as possible. Now, I'm making that sound really simple, and it's not. It can be quite complicated. There's all kinds of things that can go into that. Like there's like different sorts of deficiencies in nutrients. There are sometimes hidden infections. Sometimes there's food sensitivities. But I would think about doing those things because a 30% increased risk is no joke, right? And by the same token, if you are a woman that is suffering right now with perinatal depression, I would be getting checked for all of those conditions. Now, I have videos on just about all of those here on my channel, but Hashimoto's is very, very common. There's right ways to test for it. There's things you can do about it if you have it. Same thing with celiac disease and ulcerative colitis. So it is a two-way street, and I think it's really important that this information has come out because we should be looking for these autoimmune conditions in women that have perinatal depression, and we should suspect or be considering that they might have perinatal depression if they have these autoimmune conditions. So I think you guys get the point. So if you have any of these conditions or if you have perinatal depression, I'd be working with someone that understands, number one, about multiple tissue antibody testing, how to do this lymphocyte map testing. I mean, basically, you got to make sure you're working with someone that knows what these conditions are, what is the physiology involved, and then what tests can we do to kind of dissect and evaluate the immune system. how to interpret those tests, and then what can you do for treatment, because there is a world of things you can do depending on what your immune system fingerprint is and what the other testing shows. But only if you know it. So anyway, I hope you found this video helpful today. Just make sure you're working with someone that understands what we talked about today. So if you have Hashimoto, psoriasis, multiple sclerosis, ulcerative colitis, or celiac disease, you have a 30% increased risk for developing perinatal depression. And if you have perinatal depression, there is a 30% increased risk that you have one of those autoimmune conditions. So somebody needs to be looking at that. Okay, I'll see you later.